Video we're gonna talk about design system basics, and it's not just basics, it's actually like, for me, this is like the quickest way and the most like minimum viable version of doing design systems. So let's first talk about like what are the most popular development frameworks that most of like the development team uses. We have Vue, we have React, and we have Angular. This is like most of, if you work in a startup or if you work even in a medium-sized company, most of these companies use either Vue or React or Angular. And the good thing about Vue and React and Angular is they have their own front-end components that you can actually use ready-made in your product. So for example, if we go to Vue, for example, Vue have its own component library, which is called Vuetify. And if you go to UI components, you can see that you have all kinds of components. You have alerts, and they give you examples that you can adjust. You have, for example, you have chips. You have data tables, I think, also tables. And yeah, you have all kinds of components, and you can import them directly into your project. And the good thing about this is that all these components are based on the famous material design framework by Google. And all these components are well tested. You can find them in many apps across the internet that uses material design or any of these frameworks. And people got used to these components, so it's very usable, very well tested, it's very safe to use, and it's because these components are maintained by Vue or React or Angular, they are very well maintained, and they will not break your app. So that's Vuetify by Vue.js. And if you go, for example, to React, you will find also React has its own material design library that's also based on material design by Google. And they also have the same list of components here. And also, if you go to Angular, so this is Angular material, and you can find all the components that you need: autocomplete, badge, bottom sheet, card, buttons, chips, checkboxes, etc. And you can even like apply your theme to they offer you even like different themes to test out your components in different colors. But the good thing actually about React Material is, for example, if you know your app primary and secondary color, you can already see how your components gonna look in these primary and secondary colors. So if you go to the settings tab, if you go to edit website colors, for example, my primary color is this purple, and my secondary color is this red 200, and I'm gonna set this as set docs colors, and I'm gonna toggle to light theme so you can be able actually to see it better. And if you go to now to components, you can see that your buttons are now in the primary colors that you set. And yeah, you can see floating action component in primary and secondary color. You can see already buttons in your primary colors. Using your primary colors, you can see flex boxes, switches. You can see alerts. You can see cards. And all these components, you can just use it. They also have a Figma file here that you can open in a new tab. And in this Figma file, you can find all your components that you need from React Material. But of course, like, you need to buy it, but actually you might not even need to buy it, because if you can just copy this page and go to Figma, and yeah, I need to sign in. Sign up with email. No, this is not the email. Yeah, this is the one. Okay. Login. So this is the email I want to log in by. And yeah, Let's wait. Yeah, till we wait. Yeah, so this is basically like all the material, like all the component libraries of the most popular frameworks, React and Angular and Vue. And you also have this light version of component library by Material Design. It's called Material Design Lite, and it's ideal for mobile. And they give you also all kinds of components that you can use in your app. There's tons of material design libraries on the web. There's something called also RMWC. This is also a React material web component that's also like more lightweight than this component library. So yeah, that's where you can get components for your design system. And here, for example, if you're gonna go to plugins and Figma to HTML, and you can just copy any page of these. Like for example, I like this page. I like the components in this page. I can just copy and paste it here. I give the width of MacBook screen, and I can click import. And then the whole page will be imported directly into your Figma. It just takes some time, like sometimes a minute, in order to be able to see the page. So yeah, that's it. But yeah, you might ask yourself, like, how can I go from, yeah, now the page is imported, and you can reuse these components basically. Cool. And yeah, now you might ask yourself, okay, what I'm gonna do with these components actually. Like usually when you work in a startup or any product company, they come to you with some colors. So they tell you, for example, okay, for example, this is our primary color, this is our secondary color, and we need a design system. And the way you're gonna do this is you can, as I said, like you can just go to, this is like the easiest way. You can just go to this React material thing, and you can edit website colors, and you can set the primary color the same as the primary color here, and the secondary color the same as the secondary color here. So my main secondary color is actually, in this case, the primary color is purple, and the secondary color according to the brand in this case was actually red. So I can try these two colors and see like how the components would look like in this primary and secondary color. And usually, as a general rule in design systems, it's that you only have one primary color, and you also need to stick to one secondary color. You don't need to have more than one secondary color, but also if you have more than one secondary color, it's also fine. So now you have these colors, and you have these libraries that you can extract components from. So for example, if your company uses React, probably you're gonna use this material design library. And if you're gonna go to all the components here, you can just take the components based on your colors and put them here. So for example, if you have the primary color as purple, then your navbar would look like this, your tabs would look like this, your buttons would look like this, your chips would look like this, your modals would look like this. The font is usually like based on your branding. You can also like, usually if you work in a company, they have their own font, so you can also have different types of typography based on the font. You also have these cards, you have notices, you have form elements, you have tables, you have lists, you have accordions, and all these things, all these components actually are just based on this React material design components. But if you just give this to your developers, this is just not enough, because they don't know when to use the primary color, the primary buttons, when to use the secondary buttons, what are the guidelines, what are the sizing guidelines for the models, what are the spacing inside the cards. what are the spacing between each element, when to use this style of tabs, when to use the other style of tabs, when to use each kind of these colors. So I have, for example, usually while I worked in this company, I set like approximately 18 colors that we use in our design system. And yeah, for basically when to use one of these, like they have 5 secondary colors, when to use one of these secondary colors. So yeah, there's lots of rules that you need to set for your developers in order to be able to actually work with your design system. Otherwise, your design system will just end up in Figma. So the way I did this is I established a design system documentation. And the design system documentation is something that looks like this. Where is it? Yeah. We use Jira, and inside Jira there's something called Confluence, and in Confluence you can write very long, extensive documentation pages. So this is called, the company that I used to work in is called Tubix. And in Tubix I had this component library documentation. First I talk about the color, first I give them a link to the Figma file where it includes all the components, it's here. And then I have my colors. So for example, I say these are our primary colors. We have 4 shades of the primary color. The colors in general have usage, so when to use these colors. And I talk about the secondary colors. For example, the red you use for the error, the orange you use for the warning, the blue you use for the notice, and the green you use for success. And each of these colors have usage guidelines. And these usage guidelines is just based on your UX sense. So ideally you tried these components in your product, and yeah, for example, you have an app in your, you have a page in your product, and you tried these components, and you find out that okay, if I'm gonna use the purple, for example, for the charts, it doesn't look good. So please don't use purple for the charts, for example. Or for example, that I set here a rule that says, okay, don't use this green for text because it has a low contrast, just use this green because it has a higher contrast. We have these label colors, and I set also guidelines for when to use them, text colors, guidelines, border colors, etc. And then I talk about typography, and in typography we have like different styles from H1 to paragraph style. And also each one has a usage guideline. And for example, here I say if you have an empty state, use an H3 font style. If you have a like a banner or like a paywall or a premium feature, you can use H1, etc. Here also, like, I have spacing guidelines. So yeah, for example, the spacing between like legend sections such as charts, usually they have bigger spacing between tables, spacing between icon and text, etc. And here I talk about components. So I break down each component to specs and usage. So for example, the main navigation have some specs. So it has always a fixed height of 50bx, and it has each nav link has a 14bx font, etc. The side navigation also have some usage guidelines and specs. Usage guidelines is like where to use it, when to use these components. Specs is like the font, the style, the border, the spacing. All these are called specs, and the usage is just like the UX guidelines, where to use this, when to use this component. So for example, primary tabs I use it for secondary navigation. Tertiary tabs I use it for folders, etc. Buttons I also have usage and specs. Links, icons, chips, modals, cards, forms. Also, I give here a link to the material design forms from React. This company uses React. And yeah, also tables, lists, accordions, error states. Also, like, you need also to include the edge cases in your design system. So usually when something is not loading from the endpoint, you need an error state. If something is empty because you have no data, you need an empty state. So here I give an example for an error state when the whole page is not loading. Here I give an example for an error state when you edit something and it's not saving. Here I give an error state when you submit a pop-up but your action is not submitted. Here I give an example for an empty state. When you have, for example, you only open a pop-up in which you see some results, but there's no results. And at the end, I give a link to the Figma prototype where they can see actually the app with the new component library. And the next step after this is usually that you have to give a link to this design documentation to your developers to review it, to ask questions whether these specs make sense, whether some rules are missing. So for example, one of the developers asked me a question, okay, when we have an error state, should the error message be centered in the page, horizontally and vertically, or where it should be positioned? So I added some usage guidelines in the model sections that says that, yeah, if you have an error state inside the model, then make it please centered horizontally and vertically. And that's how you can go from having just a list of colors from your company or from client to have a fully documented design system. So yeah, that's it. And maybe let's check if we didn't cover anything else. Yeah, what I also wanted to cover is something called color tokens. And the old way that designers used to work with colors is just they give you a list of colors and each color have a color code. And I think this is not enough. This is totally misleading. Because usually the developers take these colors and name them as variables inside their code. So for example, the variable can be called something like, okay, red error, and this is the color code, orange warning, and this is the color code. So the name of the color is called a color token. And it's very important to be very selective about your color tokens because they should be very descriptive for your color. So for example, yeah, the red, you should say, for example, red error text color. This red, for example, I can say red error background color. So this is the name of the token. Green success text color. Green success background color. Dark purple hover. Default purple primary, for example. Medium purple, light purple. So the way you name the colors, it will make it very much easier for your developers to use these colors. So for example, if a developer, for example, is working on a table and this table has an error state and he doesn't know which color to use to the error state, then he can just go back to the style sheet that he has in the app and he will find the color variable called red error, and then he can use it. Or for example, you have a title and you have a subtitle text and you have like a color variable called subtitle text, then in this case he can use this color variable. So it's very important to name your colors and not just to color code them. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.